survival. I understand. I promised them women.
What?
8 days ago, I found Jones with his gun in his mouth. He said he was going to kill himself because there was no future. What could I say to him? We fight off the infected, or we wait until they starve to death, and then what? What do 9 men do except wait to die themselves? I moved us from the blockade, I set the radio broadcasting, and I promised them women. Because women mean a future.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There's nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks? Why do I say this? Because we got Holy Ghost power!
You're listening to a podcast exploring faith and fear, what scares us and what saves us. This is the fear of God. Hello and welcome back to the Fear of God podcast, your favorite podcast, everybody's favorite podcast. We are so glad you're here for this episode and this installment of our umbrella series for the year titled 2020-2020. To know exactly what it's all about, go back and listen to our pre-cap episode from, 6 weeks or so ago, the end of January, for deeper insight into what the series is all about. But basically, you all are voting on your favorite horror films from the last 20 years, and we're covering one from each year. We began formally 2 weeks ago with Shadow of the Vampire and continued last week with Donnie Darko. And we have a very special movie for us all to talk about today. But speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse. And typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey. And guys, I'm a little worried about Reed. He was here a minute ago, but strangely, he had this big giraffe and he tossed it on the ground. And I was like, "Oi, you can't leave that lion around." And he was like, "It's not a lion, it's a giraffe." And then stormed off. It was weird, but he'll be back, I hope. In the meantime, we want you to know that at the Fear of God, we explore the holy and the horrific at the intersection of faith and fear, dissecting what scares us in order to find what saves us. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, come find us on Twitter, on Instagram, or join us in the Facebook group for lively discussions around horror and genre-themed media, books, and film. The phrase horror and genre-themed is kind of a tough one to say. But here at the Fear of God, we explore. We don't explain, except for right now, when I'm going to explain that you can listen to the Fear of God podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, CastBox, and anywhere else podcasts are sold. While you're at it, subscribe to us on your favorite platform, and also, and especially on iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and/or glowing review. To find us on the web, visit thefearofgodpodcast.com, where you'll find a blog and an episode archive, and you'll be able to purchase merchandise from the show. See fellow foggers in their Fear of God merch on t-shirts, mugs, cell phone cases, pillows. Reed! Hey, you're back, buddy. Hey, man.
Top of the morning to you, mate.
Yeah? Ooh, I'm not even going to do
No.
Speaking of mates, Reed, you are my running mate this election year, and I don't know if you heard,
I probably
but the
did.
Michigan, Missouri, and Mississippi primaries were today, and Reed, we won!
We were just sweeping. We
won!
It's a landslide.
Reports are not yet in for Washington, Idaho, and North Dakota, but we'll get back to this next week, I'm sure.
Okay.
We'll know in time, but I've got a good feeling about it.
Me too. Me too.
Riri, we are.
If pattern
we're the-
continues, yes.
We're the front. I mean, I think it kind of goes without saying we're the front runners now. I mean, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's always a dark horse in there somewhere just going to come in, and who knows? But, it's a pretty dominating lead. I feel proud of us. I feel confident about our continued success in this podcasting primary venture. It's we're doing well. We're doing well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna go all the way, and
yes,
we're gonna start tapping people for the cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
I've never formed a cabinet before. It'll be fun.
Well, we're doing it in real time. Like every time we have a guest, they get a position.
I
mean,
like
it's amazing.
You get a position in the cabinet. You get a position in the cabinet.
I know. I feel like with our British sort of flavor today, like maybe we should have had a foreign correspondent on. I don't know. But regardless.
Well, foreign correspondent Vera Gowdy, you are with us in spirit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not in actuality.
So can I tell you something about British people?
I don't know. Should you? Where is this going?
I saw a tweet, and it's really funny.
This will definitely go somewhere positive.
Oh, of course. I saw a tweet,
sure.
and I don't remember who tweeted it or whatever, but I thought it was delightful. It said, "I'm really disappointed that British people call mac and cheese instead of something like patty winks and chonkers." And I thought that was really funny. It's like, you got your mac and cheese? Oh, you mean some patty whacks and chonkers? Yeah.
Well, is it patty wax or patty wings? You said patty wings, but then you spoke patty wax.
Well, taster's choice. I mean, I guess.
Well,
no. It's neither, unfortunately. It's just mac and cheese. So
is it neither or is it neither?
Is this a mustache or is this a mistake? It's clearly a mistake. So.
I mean, this is what happens when you go on Twitter. Right.
This is the direct result of me going on Twitter.
I love that, Twitter is this just this bog of human verbal excrement. And what I love about you is you're like, patty winks and chonkers. That is my takeaway from Twitter. Yeah. I'm proud of you, Reed. I'm proud of you.
Well, yeah, never use the words verbal and excrement in the same sentence again.
Well, it relays the point.
Well, it sure does. You know what else relays the point?
Unlike patty winks and chonkers.
No. You know what else relays the point?
I don't.
What you watching?
Do.
What you reading?
Patty winks and chonkers.
What are you listening to?
You know what's always a good idea for you and I?
Oh boy.
Is determining to go into a dialect in the moment and then committing. It really always pays off. Yeah, it pays off. I mean, we always get it absolutely correct. That whatever accent it is, we pull it off.
We have a Rolodex of global dialects, and we just summon
listeners
them.
Are like, well, I used to enjoy Nathan Reed's just just astute assessments. Now all they do is just do stupid voices for 2 hours.
I guess so. Mm-hmm.
Did you ask me something?
I did. I was wanting to know what you had been watching, reading, and or listening to.
Well, friend Lackey,
Yeah.
I think we have a mutual whatcha for the moment.
We do.
We do. Wow. And I happened to steal away recently, and you did get to this one first, so I will give you.
Yeah.
I'll give you some credit here.
Things are changing. I'm just letting you know. I got to prioritize this damn movie because it's going to be on the top 10.
I know. What's so funny is despite your kind of blistering accusation, at least the first time we did this, I was not actually trying with great intent to beat you. Now it's become a thing. But I knew when you went to see it, because I know how you are about movie outings and how sparse they can be. I was like, look at this little Patty Winks.
Yeah. Little Patty Winks and chonkers.
He's trying to go get this movie out of the way.
I'm gonna go see Invisible Man, honey. I gotta prioritize it. Okay, you don't understand.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, where is he?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I found that one on Twitter. That's
another one of those verbal excrement jokes that would just.
Yeah. It's just Anyway, so yes, we did both, independent of each other, see The Invisible Man.
Yes.
And,
yes.
I think I will speak for me, and then you can likewise. I thought it was great.
Oh, it was wonderful.
I have no doubt it will show up on a best of 2020 list.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If not, I mean, I don't know what else is coming out this year, but a contender for the top. Like, it is so well put together and so broadly beloved. Like, I have found very, very few people who watched it who did not actively enjoy it. It's a really outstanding modernization of the Invisible Man story. They not only managed to bring in some updated technology and some updated logistical dynamics, but also brought it pretty relevant thematically as well, with some things that were prescient for our time. And and, I mean, it's remarkable. And so a brilliant approach. And of course, now less than like 2 or 3 weeks since its release, now there's announcements about, they're going to update a Dracula now. They're going to update a Frankenstein now. There's all of these, Monsterverse in the works. Not that long ago, the Universal monster pantheon, the Dark Universe, was effectively dead in the water with Tom Cruise's The Mummy. He didn't direct it, but starring in it. And now it appears that there's an option and a possibility that even if they're not all connected, that we could see major reinventions of all of those core characters, which honestly, if they're all as good as Invisible Man, I'm very excited for.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I would hope that Universal would set aside the Dark Universe branding, just because it's, one, kind of silly, and two, they have not succeeded with any of that yet.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I think a bigger takeaway is, goodness gracious, Blumhouse. Like,
yeah,
they have mastered their niche, and it's really, really impressive.
And I don't know how much. I honestly do not know how actively involved Jason Blum is in each of these projects. So I will say this with a big caveat, that I don't know if he's just funding it or if he's actually in the development process. If he happens to be an active participant in the development of these projects, he's a genius. Like, not just a marketing genius. Like, he has stumbled onto a substantive way to tell stories that are broadly effective. They've had plenty of misses. It's not, like a complete, unanimous, everything is majorly successful, but their misses have been far fewer than their hits. And, I mean, if Jason Blum is actually helping to develop these projects, he is brilliant. I mean, he's brilliant in his own right as a marketer. But
and to your point, though, I mean, this is the formula they've mastered, and that is you focus on competent production over tentpole, and your misses, because they don't cost as much, don't matter as much in the grand view. Whereas, because something like The Mummy featuring Tom Cruise is such a grandiose production, when it misses, which it was, I mean, I don't like to be a naysayer, but had nothing going for it.
No,
I mean,
it's true.
Just, when it misses so magnificently, it's a significant miss.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really now. And gosh, speaking of Blumhouse, we are recording on a Tuesday. The Hunt is coming out.
Yeah.
And if there was a movie that this coming weekend, like if there was a movie that has mastered its niche, it's that one. I don't know if you've seen the most recent trailer. Like, it was on Invisible Man, on my Invisible Man.
Oh, yeah. Then I saw that trailer. Yeah, and it's
just in other words, using the headline nature of it to sell itself.
Yeah,
and
it was great,
fantastic, and it's Blumhouse as well, and it's old Lindelof too.
That's funny. I knew it was Lindelof. I did not know it was Blumhouse. That's interesting. Cool. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's. I think that's correct.
Cool.
But anyway, yeah, that's what I've been
Invisible Man.
watching.
No, if you have not, by the time this airs, it's probably heading on its way out of theaters. But if you have not yet checked out Invisible Man, and if you are on the fence about it, huge recommendation for it from us. So I guess there's nothing more to say except for that was another installment of What You Watching?
What you reading?
Oh my God, what you listening to?
I don't know what just happened there.
I was all prepared for it, and then suddenly it's like, what you reading? I was like, there's another. There's another voice in here. I was talking about Invisible Man. And
Is that my voice?
Is that my voice?
So, yes, that has been a whatcha, and what you know. It is time to move on to the next thing. Reed, today, we're continuing 2020.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. We had 2000.
Wait. I'm sorry. I misspoke for a moment. Lackey is Lackey the listicle, the occasionally list making Lackey. Would you be so kind, my friend, as to enumerate for the listeners?
I will.
Even in the word listener is the word list.
That's true.
How they can continue to assist us as we move through 2020.
Absolutely. All right, so before we get into this list, we are about to reveal your top 10 favorite horror films of 2002. If you want to participate, which we need you to do, you need to go to thefearofgodpodcast.com. You need to click on the banner at the top. It will take you to the surveys. Some of the surveys have already closed down because obviously the lists are tallied now. So you need to go to the banner, click on there. You'll see the available surveys left. We especially need you. We've added some new surveys, so if you've already ventured over there and voted on 2000 through 2005, then you might want to venture over and throw your votes in for 2006, 7, and 8, which are up and are available. Cast your vote for as many of those films as you want. We'll tally the list for you, and we will be counting down through this year. We will be counting down your favorite horror films of each year, starting in 2000, going all the way up to 2020. So, yes, today we have for you the top 10 favorite horror films of 2002. We're going to count this list down in a second, but I gotta mention. We're not going to do this every episode. We've never done it yet.
What?
No. It's just I'm gonna mention one film that did not make the top 10, but I just want to mention it because it's Fear of God canon, and it came so close, very very close. By a very slim margin, it got edged out. But number 11 would have been Lucky McKee's May, which we covered back in the earlier days of the Fear of God, and from what I understand is a top 10 favorite film for you, isn't it? Like you love May, right?
I mean, top 10 is an understatement. It would be cruising. It's so on the list, it's off the list. Like that's how fire that film is.
It kept rising all the way up to number 1, and then just kept going. It just was like, what list? What list?
It's like a Looney Tunes gag with the carnival thing with the bell at the top, and you hammer it down. It's like I was like, yeah, blows up the top.
Smashed the
off
list.
It goes. Yeah.
So yes, I had to give some love
and
to
I was
old
just
Lucky
like,
McKee.
May I never see that again?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go there.
So no.
All right.
I'm just rolling with it.
So all right. So you want to start us off with number 10?
I will. I'm happy to. I would like to point out that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've seen 6.5 of these films, so that's
okay, great,
it's pretty good. It's growing.
That's pretty good.
And then it shrinks again for 2003.
Okay.
All right, so we're on 2002, right?
Yes, 2002. So go ahead and start us off with number 10.
So number 10 is you start with 10. I'm gonna go.
Oh, okay, no problem. So number 10, directed by Mark Pellington, starring Richard Gere. It is The Mothman Prophecies. What's funny about this film is I remember watching it in proximity to when it came out, and I remember liking it a lot. I have never gone back to revisit it, so I'm not sure how well it would hold up, but I have pretty fond memories.
It's number
of it.
10.
It's number 10. Evidently, I'm not alone.
I mean, May is right behind it, so that must mean just by virtue of that right. Mothman must be.
All right, sure.
Just
sure.
Moving right along, number 9. This was of my 6.5 I've seen. This is the half. Is the film Dog Soldiers, directed by Neil Marshall.
Yes.
Which
do you recognize that name?
I think Neil Marshall or Dog Soldiers.
Neil Marshall.
Sure, I recognize the name, but
the proximity.
I'm not gonna know.
I have not seen it. But he directed the recently much derided, starring David Harbour, Hellboy. Yes. So I have not seen Hellboy yet. So I don't know if
That makes me sad.
I know,
I
right?
wanted that to do well. I love me some Harbor, and that seems a pretty fitting casting.
No, absolutely. He seemed to look great.
It bombed gloriously.
No, it was pretty devastating. Yeah, but anyway,
So no,
Hellboy's not on the
but
list.
we did. Neither of us have seen Hellboy, but
Correct.
1.5 of us have seen Dog Soldiers.
Yeah. Do you want to tell him why it's a half? You want to just go ahead and spill the beans? You want to spill your beans?
Hark!
Okay, so
I can if you want to. I mean, I always
wow,
just makes
it's a little antagonistic.
So back in the fall of 2019, I and several of the actually On Writing, for those of you who follow along at home, our On Writing episode was recorded during a weekend of what was a gathering of faces new and old for Reed and myself, but it was a little group of guys hanging out watching movies, one of which was sort of Dog Soldiers. We played this elaborate game to figure out what movie we wanted to watch, and Dog Soldiers won, and I think it was Andy had not seen it,
Right.
and the rest of the group, more or less, I think Ethan is excluded here. I think he watched
No,
yeah,
attempted
to.
Yeah. No, you are correct. Ian was sitting on the couch with you guys.
He was watching the film that was chosen by the group, right?
Exactly.
And while the film is on and half of the group is trying to watch it, the other half is about two feet behind them, just chattering and enjoying each other's company, which is great. It's great.
Yeah,
community is great.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I picked up kind of every 10th word from the heavily British Dog Soldiers film, and
oh man,
and so the story lives in infamy. Yeah,
I wonder if is it Australian? I can't remember. I'm struggling to remember the actual, but yes, they were heavily accented. Whoever they were heavily accented. Whether it was,
I don't think it's Australian,
but yes, and so
at this point, who can know?
No, of course,
the movie played, it started and then it finished, and dogs were involved.
I apologize again for contributing to the conversation behind you. I had never been in the same room with these gentlemen, and I wanted to.
I am not impugning the desire to, invest in and enrich fellowship and friendship. There is,
of course,
absolutely nothing wrong and everything right about that in proper context. Moving right along,
being when the movie is not playing on the screen.
Right.
Okay, so moving right along, we have yet another entry by our beloved Guillermo del Toro. This is the sequel to the film that basically is responsible for the Marvel Universe, a la Nathan Rouse's trivial bit, and it is Blade 2. It is your number 8.
Not this film.
No. I said it is the sequel to the film.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
That is what I said. See, I didn't let you listen to Dog
People
Soldiers.
were talking about or behind me, and you just...
I'm wondering now how much you would have heard Dog Soldiers had you just been on your own.
I would have fallen asleep in that setting. I was too mad to in the real setting.
Like, why are they talking behind me?
Son of a...
That's funny. So, but no, okay. In case you missed it,
watch Dog Soldiers.
Number 8 was Blade 2 by Guillermo del Toro, which I actually prefer to the first Blade. I think Blade 2 is really quite excellent.
Yeah?
Yeah. You know what?
But Del Toro did the first one, right?
No. I forget who directed the first one, but Del Toro only did the second one. I feel bad. We just sort of bypassed Dog Soldiers. I'm going to take like 30 seconds here. Just Dog Soldiers is about werewolves, military.
Why? Don't spoil it for me.
No. You've seen half the movie.
No, I've seen all of it.
You've heard.
Haven't comprehend.
Half of it.
I heard half of it, and I comprehended a third of it. That's kind of.
This list is so sloppy. In the
okay,
That's my
number
fault.
7. Number 7 is Fog Cannon. You got to make these. You got to tag these on here so we can make reference to it. Is Bubba Hotep, directed by Don Coscarelli.
Yes,
starring Fear of God fave, Mr. Bruce Campbell, the one and only.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? If you can't remember what we've covered, that's not my fault.
I didn't say I couldn't remember what we've covered. I'm just saying I don't know the episode number. which only Steve Beckley can do
that is
on
true.
on immediate ask.
He can do it on command. Like
Don't you do?
It's amazing.
Well, don't make me take you off mic.
Our
What's
producer Rathan Nouse is gonna
he's gonna get the hook out on you.
Okay, so number 7, Bubba Hotep. Go back.
By
and
that I
listen to
mean
our
the
episode.
Candyman hook.
Oh, nice.
You like that?
I do. Okay, so number 7, Bubba Hotep. Number 6 was a film I was happy to see make it this far up the list. It's a film I haven't seen in a long time, but it's a really interesting film. It's called 1 Hour Photo, directed by Mark Romanek, and it stars Robin Williams in one of his rare horror movie roles. It is a really fascinating little film. It has been, again, as many with these, it's been years since I've seen it. You know, my biggest connection to Mark Romanek is
Nope.
Did you ever see it was pretty popular, but I don't know what your music video consumption was like in the past 10 to 15 years or whatever, but Johnny Cash, when he was making this big resurgence and Rick Rubin was like helping him produce a bunch of new material and everything, he did a cover of Nine Inch Nails' song Hurt. And that Hurt video, which was really popular and was seen widely, was directed by Mark.
Such a good cover.
Oh, it's wonderful. And the video of it, which is as powerful as the rendition audibly, was directed and conceptualized by Mark Romanek.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
You know, I have seen that video. It's been years, and all I have is memories of black and white imagery. But this actually makes a 1 hour photo with Robin Williams makes a good double feature with Flubber. Those are great, kind of in a pair. Yeah.
I would actually recommend 1 hour photo with Aladdin 3, the King of Thieves. That's.
Are you sure that's 3? Yeah, because Jafar is the 2.
Yeah, Return of Jafar is the second one. But 1 hour photo.
But I don't think Robin Williams doesn't do past 1 though.
No, he does. He did 3.
No, he does not.
He did 3.
Really?
Yeah.
He come back for 3?
It was a contractual obligation, but yeah. You know who voiced?
What?
Yeah. You know who voiced him for number 2?
Will Smith.
No. No. It was my boy Dan Castellaneta of Homer Simpson fame.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Robin Williams came back for number 3. Anyway, 1 hour photo.
You know
Williams.
what I have a fun. So part of this is just trekking through nostalgia, right?
Yeah, of course.
And not the Watchmen variety, but although maybe 2002 is a good year, man. And I saw a double feature at the Peachtree Mall movie theater in Columbus, Georgia.
Okay.
Of 1 hour photo and Moulin Rouge.
Oh,
that
wow.
Is a heck of a double feature.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my gosh.
And I doubt it will come up when we look at Box Office Mojo, but speaking of tops, Moulin Rouge is top like three for me in life.
And that is actually not sarcastic or jokey. You love that film tremendously.
I know it's not sarcastic or jokey.
I know. I'm pointing it out for the listeners because the listeners can't always tell. Sometimes you have such a deadpan delivery. It's just like, I don't know what it is.
No.
All right.
Oh man.
What was number 5?
Number 5 on the list of Best of Horror 2002 as voted on by Fear of God listeners is Cabin Fever, featuring Chris Elliott, directed by Eli Roth.
That's Kevin Boy.
I know. No, I've never seen Cabin Fever. I've lived it though.
You don't have to. Like
I wasn't planning to.
No, it's. I should preface my statement there that I am not an Eli Roth fan. I don't like his films in general. So I know he has a lot of fans, and clearly Cabin Fever is number 5 on this list. So I know that is among his films.
I mean, can you call yourself a horror fan, Reed?
Wow! Wow! I mean,
you ain't horror. You ain't horror.
No,
you ain't nothing.
No. So, Hostel is obviously his most popular and known film, but I think Cabin Fever, by and large, is what a lot of people cite as one of their favorites of his. I could be wrong about that because, again, it's hard for me to keep track. I am not an Eli Roth fan. So, although I did like He hosted the series that AMC did on the Masters of Horror, where he interviewed a lot of legendary. It was pretty good. I forget exactly. It wasn't called Masters of Horror. That was the Showtime series. It was another and a history of horror, I think. But it was really good.
I have seen the next four. The final four on
nice.
this list. I have.
Okay,
so,
great.
What is number 4, Reed?
So number 4, directed by David Fincher, a bit of a unique film in his filmography. It's Panic Room, starring Jodie Foster. I remember seeing this in the theater, but it was long before, and because this film obviously followed Seven, not immediately because it was like 5 years earlier, but I had no awareness when I saw Panic Room in the theater that it was the director of Seven. But I remember I remember Panic Room being a very effective, incredibly taut little thriller. But again, like so many of these, it has been quite a few years since I've revisited it, but I have fond memories of it.
And for Fog Canon followers, David Fincher also, as Reed just referenced, directed Seven and Zodiac, both of which are in the Fog Canon, and you can find enumerated in alphabetical order on the archives page of fearofgodpodcast.com. Number 3 on this list, also Fog Canon. Was this part of a series? I can't remember. This is Monster Mash.
Yeah, this was, I believe, Monster Mash. I think.
Is The Ring, directed by Gore Verbinski.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
The American remake.
We had a yes. Yeah. We had a lot to say about that on the episode in which we covered it.
Exactly. Go back and seek that out. Number 2, very, very happy that this is so high on the list. Directed by M. Night Shyamalan. It is the Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix, Academy Award-winning Joaquin Phoenix starring Signs. Signs is your number 2 favorite horror film. Man,
what a great flick.
I love Signs. Can we pause for a second while I go back and listen to our episode and watch the movie, and then I'll be back in a little bit. Just give me some time.
I am insane with anger that you have left.
So great. Yes. Okay, so number 2 was
Felt
Signs.
wrong not to swing. God, what a movie.
It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. If you want to hear us gush about it for almost an hour and a half, go back and listen to our episode on it in springtime for
an hour and a
summer.
half. Those were greater days.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. That's what our listeners think. Number 1 on this list of best horror of 2002 and our featured content for this episode's recording is directed by Danny Boyle, starring Cillian Murphy and Brendan Gleeson, amongst a few others. 28 Days Later.
Indeed.
We will leave our thoughts until 28 or less minutes later.
Absolutely. So this is obviously an interesting list. We're trying to sort of track some of the patterns that we're seeing arise from some of these some of this material. Nathan, would you mind queuing up ye old box office mojo and
happily Riri
finding what the top grossing films of 2002 are, so we can engage that part of this conversation. While you search for that, I'm looking over. So it's interesting to me. We're starting to see there's a lot of confinement here, like Cabin Fever, Panic Room. Signs is a film that heavily features, basically the last half hour they're confined to their home. Dog Soldiers features a large chunk of time where they're confined. Bubba Hotep, they are confined in a nursing home through the majority of it. So it's just interesting to me. Obviously, the film's all created by different people and started at different times, but it's interesting to me how much of the list involves basically a threat imposed upon someone who is basically trapped in a particular place, and I find that really, really interesting.
Yes. Dog Soldiers. It's a good flick.
Did you even hear what I said?
Well, I got caught up in the box office mojo list real quick. Now, this is fun. So the top 5 worldwide box office of 2002. We are in the just thick of franchise fever. I'm sure there's some academics out there, some film academics out there who would be able to kind of chart probably this era as the beginning of what of where we even find ourselves now in terms of sort of franchise fever. So interestingly, last week the top film, I think its worldwide box office was in the 800 millions. The top for this year's is in the mid 900s. So
it's coming.
Number 5, worldwide box office. And it is fascinating. In some ways, it's sort of like, just reading a box office list from the last year or so.
Oh.
So number 5 on this list is Men in Black 2. Speaking
Oh.
of Will Smith.
Okay.
So Men in Black 2. Wow, and what a disparity between these box office grosses. So worldwide, Men in Black 2 made $440 million. The number one. That's 5 movies difference.
Wow.
Made $500 million more than that. The number 4 on the list is, God love him, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
That's number 4? That wasn't
Number
top?
4.
Wow.
Again,
that's interesting.
No. You kind of have an idea where this is going based on last week. That one was $645 million. Number 3 is the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, which we saw together.
We did.
And
we sure did.
And premiered the night before the very first free comic book day event ever in 2002.
Oh, that's amazing.
I remember going to see this movie with you and Keith Cassidy, and we ate and various other people too, who probably mattered at that point in time, but that was and they're still wonderful people.
Somebody's still sitting there listening, like, oh, he's gonna mention me. He's gonna mention me. Oh.
Probably Denise. You might have been there. Maybe Carrie. Okay, yes, name check. And I have this vague memory of us eating food at Steak and Shake. I was going to say dinner, but do you really eat dinner at Steak and Shake? You just kind of eat stuff.
Well, yeah, I get that.
So yeah, first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man was number 3 with $821 million. Flip-flopping from 2001.
Oh, okay.
Is
yes.
number 2 is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Yep.
With Sorcerer's Stone being number 1 the previous year at $878 million, almost 879. And number 1 on this list is The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers,
Indeed.
at $936 million. And, Reed, I mean, like, we effectively are with Fellowship of the Ring, and shortly before that, you and I are officially at kind of 20 years of friendship.
Wow.
You're there. Because I
crazy,
have distinct memories. And by distinct, I mean slightly foggy and, a little obscured by time. But
That's distinct for you.
these days, that's distinct.
Wow.
But of having zero awareness or knowledge of Lord of the Rings, and I think you had stolen out to see the first one, like on your own, and I was really unsure of what it was, and I just have this memory of you telling me about Lord of the Rings, and me like, what? Okay. So, and then going to see it, and then subsequently with Fellowship, watching it at home with subtitles on and gaining a whole new understanding of what on earth I was watching.
Wow.
Just because there's so many names and proper places,
of
proper
course.
names and places and stuff in those films. Anyway, so yes, top 5 of 2002, Men in Black 2, Attack of the Clones, first Tobey Spider-Man, Chamber of Secrets, and Two Towers. That's fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, it's interesting. It feels like obviously for the top grossers, we're going to start getting into the big spectacled variety in the horror community. It appears that there was some sense of, at least, going back to 2001 when these would have been sort of conceived and fashioned and created. Obviously, we talked last week, we addressed that 2001, obviously, towards the end in September, there was the devastating attack on the Twin Towers. And it's amazing to me to then see, as we're going to do, what begins to progress out of that. And again, the overwhelming theme to me of 2002 is, and 28 Days Later doesn't really, well, no. Actually, we'll get into that in a few minutes. It does have an element of this element of confinement, and this element of feeling trapped and feeling like a threat is sort of imposing on you in a way that there's no easy way out or no quick escape from the threat. Again, looking at Dog Soldiers taking place in a wooded cabin, Bubba Hotep in a nursing home. 1 hour photo, I think the majority of it's not a confinement story, but I think the majority of it takes place in the store where he works. Cabin Fever is directly confined. Panic Room is confined. Signs is confined towards its last half hour. So there's a lot going on there. But yeah, that was your top 10 favorite horror films of 2002 in this installment of 2020. If you are, concerned about these placements or you're interested to cast your vote, go over to thefearofgodpodcast.com, follow the banner to take the surveys. We will tally your votes over the next few weeks and through the remainder of the year, taking little breaks along the way. But we need your participation. Go to the website to check it out and vote.
All right, Riri. So this is fun.
I know. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I hope our listeners
I'm not a good list maker, and but I do enjoy sort of assessing lists, unless it is like to-do lists, honey-do lists, like chore lists. Like, yeah. This is more fun. Like, hey, what movie made more money than what other movie?
This I'm enjoying, indeed.
Yes. So today we are discussing Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, and I know he had Trainspotting before this. Do you know, was there anything else between this and Trainspotting? And I think Trainspotting's his first.
I think Trainspotting is his debut. I'm pretty sure that there were movies in between, but I'm actually going to look it up in real time and see, because I don't want to.
I'm gonna challenge you and say I don't think you're right.
You think that it is just Trainspotting and then straight to 28 Days Later, huh?
If only because I know from the trivial bits that you're right. There was another island.
He made The Beach. So
The Beach.
Yeah. So, but there were actually there's a lot of TV movies and there's a few TV episodes. But in terms of film, his debut was not Trainspotting. It was a film called Shallow Grave, which I have seen but have almost no memory of. But then Trainspotting, A Life Less Ordinary, then The Beach, and then a couple of other TV movies, and then 28 Days Later. So it sounds like there was a few things sort of along the way. The Beach also, as is
What'd you call me?
Right. As is 28 Days Later, The Beach, I know it was written by Alex Garland. I believe the screenplay was, but I think Alex Garland even wrote the source material, possibly even a novel on which it was based or something. But The Beach is also an Alex Garland story starring Leonardo DiCaprio. But
right.
But yeah. So
I do find as harrowing as 28 Days Later is, I still think and look forward to when this film's year hits. I think of Danny Boyle's films, the scariest is probably Slumdog Millionaire. That's a real.
You know what's funny about that is that actually that's.
I'm just kidding, everyone. I love Slumdog Millionaire.
Oh, that's one of the. There's a trio of films that when my wife and I were first dating, there's we love movies, and so went out to see a lot of movies, and Slumdog Millionaire was one of them. That was around that time, and it was fond memories.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Oh, it was really good. Yeah,
it's a good film. So, but we're not talking about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We are talking today about 28 Days Later and Riri. Trivial bits time.
Yeah, I wish we had a jingle for it. Maybe why don't you work on that
bits, Trivial bits. Now it's time for trivial bits. Hey.
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, for spontaneity, it's fine. Sure. All right.
I need a slide whistle. What in the world?
Oh my God!
I'm glad you are putting timestamps on our episodes these days.
Yes,
people can be like,
indeed.
Nah, I'm good. I don't need no list. I just want to talk about the movie. So yes, we're on Trivial Bits.
Indeed.
Did you know, Reed, that this film was shot almost entirely in sequence?
I did know that. Just a couple of reshoots that break the pattern of that. It was also shot completely digitally, which was something that at the time, it's not so uncommon now, but at the time was something that was pretty daring and a bit experimental. I don't think it was the first film to do that, but it was one of the first, and it was definitely the first film to have so much prominence for having done that.
I actually really love, and we're not going to go just didactically through every single thing on IMDb, but there are some fun ones in here. I really love that Danny Boyle and Naomi Harris, who plays Selena, developed a backstory to sort of explain her character's kind of aggressiveness, and the backstory they came up with is pretty dreadful.
It's pretty grim.
And it's that she was forced to kill her infected mother and father to save her baby brother, only to discover that her brother was also infected.
That's terrible.
That's messed up.
Absolutely terrible.
You know what else is messed up is covering this film in the heat of a global
Yeah,
viral
we'll get there.
pandemic.
Yeah, we'll get there. I just have a couple of more that I wrote down. Obviously, Uncle Stephen King, is a huge fan of this film, heavily promoted it, and even rented out an entire theater for a showing of it, I think, with some of his friends and family. Another bit, you had mentioned it earlier, that Ewan McGregor was actually supposed to play the lead instead of Cillian Murphy, but at the time he and Danny Boyle were in the midst of a falling out. He had starred in Shallow Grave, he had starred in Trainspotting, and then I forget, I did not find what the situation was that caused this casting reversal, but Leonardo DiCaprio was the lead in The Beach, and apparently Ewan McGregor and Danny Boyle had a brief falling out, which they have since reconciled. But I also found it interesting that Ryan Gosling was approached as the lead. That would have been very, very different type of performance, but landed at Cillian Murphy instead.
I love Cillian Murphy. He's great.
Yeah, he's great. He's great. That's the extent of my trivial bits.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch on there. Those were the ones that really stood out to me. So, as we are wont to do, in a nutshell, the summary of this film is global viral breakout. It's a subgenre zombie film, though not exactly, but that's the general trope, general idea. I did not see. I don't think I saw this in the theater. But I can't remember exactly, but I know I had seen it before, and it is one of very few that you and I had pretty disparate views on initially. I don't
True.
think I'm not speaking for yourself, like as in you didn't like the film, but as in just had some different.
No, that's fair.
Kind of takeaways.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
When I first saw this film, I was largely ambivalent to actively disliking it. I did admire the style, and I admired the, sort of the ambition and doing some different things with the zombie motif, which it is essentially a zombie film devoid of zombies. They are not like it'd be probably more appropriate to call them like the infected or something, because they don't eat brains. They're not dead. They are very much alive. They do not need to be killed by smashing the head. They can be killed the way any human being can be killed. But they are just infected with this viral plague that causes them to be completely manic and filled with violent rage and outbursts. And but I was while I appreciated some of those elements, I was largely frustrated by the characters, and there's something that I will get into when we extend a little bit later into the likes dislikes, that even still bothers me quite a bit on purely just kind of technical nitpicking. But this time around, to your earlier, just a few seconds ago statement, with sociopolitical rage running just rampant through our culture right now, and with coronavirus breathing down our neck, this viewing was particularly haunting, edging on the prophetic, and was a much more profound viewing experience, I think largely for the sort of the culture and the climate that we're sitting in at the moment. That having been said, I'm still, I've got a couple of dings that I would point out, but I am much more fond of the film now. I'm much more appreciative of what it tries to do and what I think it does very successful.
You want to hear a funny story?
Sure. Always down for that.
Especially when they're illustrative of my idiocy. So this is on Hulu. And I went to watch it on Hulu.
Okay.
Because we are Hulu subscribers. And I started it, and I don't know a ton about the language of kind of like high def, standard, like anamorphic widescreen, 16, all this sort of stuff. So what I'm trying to say is, when I started the Hulu transfer, the digital film, it's full screen, and I was like, I don't know. And the quality, the visual quality of the film itself was a little like that first sequence in the lab.
Oh yeah. Right.
It's just real kind of degraded.
Yeah.
image.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
And I was like, nah, I'm gonna rent this. I'm not gonna watch.
No.
I'm not. It's like $4 to rent. I'd rather watch it the real way. Certainly Hulu has, kind of
Cheaped out.
yeah. Got
Disney
like
bought
the
Hulu
old,
has cheaped out.
the old full screen format. It's like when you're picking up the disc in a bygone era at the Walmart, and the lady next to you is like, "I like it fully on the screen."
Oh
like,
my
no, you're
gosh.
dumb.
Wow.
And so I went and rented it on iTunes, and it started, and I was like, I'm so stupid. Because it is literally the exact same transfer. It is the
Yes.
exact same
Yes,
thing. And I was like,
absolutely.
well, iTunes,
No.
you got my $4.
Which that is, if I were, listing out my appreciative likes, honestly, these days, and it's funny that you say that you had that experience, the first moment that I queued it up, I remember I found that oddly refreshing. I was like, oh, this is not a polished, shimmering, like, I was drawn in this time around by the grainy sort of almost home video quality to it. And that is something that actually, like, from the gate, I was really appreciative of. Again, films today, by and large, are just very sleek, even ones that have a bit of a independent, somewhat ruddier budget and everything. This one was by design pretty grainy and pretty muted down, and I did. I liked that a lot about it because I felt like it fit the tone of the story. I felt like it, it reflects the world pretty effectively. So yeah, that's just I really like that.
So we can get into specificity here, but it's funny. I know, and I'll let you share your eventual nitpick, however from now or immediate it is.
Sure.
And so I was watching this viewing with that very much in mind, and just sort of generally trying to assess, okay, I really appreciated this, 18 years ago, whenever it was I initially watched it. What do I think of this now? And I try to reserve, kind of like you learned to be more judicious with the word masterpiece. I try to be reserved about what I just unqualified, like, I love this.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I don't know that I would say I love 28 Days Later, but I will say I love the spirit of this film. I think it's got in a way that I didn't remember, there is a very poetic and kind of sensitive quality to the production, which feels counter to what you would expect from a run-of-the-mill, which it's not run-of-the-mill, but you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the art house zombie film.
Sure.
As you just alluded, it's not traditionally zombie, but same idea, concept.
Right.
And it just has I love the score. I love little things, and this can launch us into specifics, or you can double back on broader brushes as well, but like,
sure
I love how, and to me this is a signal of this film having more on its mind than just Last Man on Earth type of storytelling.
Right. Yes, indeed.
I love how long the film lets you be with Jim wandering alone.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because it's not like, and what's coming to mind actually is I'm really not meaning for him to come up multiple times. What is the Will Smith Omega Man movie? What is that?
That's I Am Legend.
Not Omega Man. I Am Legend. Yeah.
Yes.
It's not that. This is not a character with purpose out foraging for food. This is a character discovering utter and absolute aloneness.
Oh yeah.
And to me, a lesser film would just establish the scenario, right? It's just, okay,
sure.
Well, let me just help you, viewer, understand they're all by themselves.
Right.
But 28 Days Later doesn't do that.
Nope.
I didn't actually pay attention to how long it is, but that's probably a solid 5 to 7 minute
I think you're right.
sequence of just continuing to discover and realize and be burdened by and be weighed down because of his just total aloneness in
Yeah.
a world
No,
that
absolutely.
that is utterly foreign. I just love so on this viewing, that stood out to me because I was really paying attention this time around. That sequence
Sure.
stood out as like, okay, this really does have something on its mind.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's funny. It's hard to separate that. Like, he wakes up in that hospital, and then that is a fundamental inciting premise of Robert Kirkman's The Walking Dead, is that the character of Rick
Sure.
wakes up in a hospital as well. But 28 Days Later wasn't actually the first thing to do that. There was an old John Wyndham novel called Day of the Triffids, which gets a lot of sort of nominal comparisons to 28 Days Later, and that character also wakes up after the big plague in a hospital to the devastation. But you're right, that scene is pretty remarkable, and I feel like throughout the film it delivers these. It always feels, you use the phrase that it's got more on its mind. It feels that way in every single scene. And even in, and I'll go ahead and mention what my major nitpick is with the film. Even in that, it feels like there's intentionality behind what it's trying to express. I, for whatever reason, in this particular instance, just can't, it always takes me out of the film, and I can't quite suspend my disbelief to have it. My big beef with 28 Days Later, listeners of our episode on Ready or Not will find a correlation here. My big beef with 28 Days Later is that they mention in the film that Jim was a courier before the plague broke out. He woke up in a hospital bed. Now he's just sort of foraging and trying to find his way with his group of friends along the path. And then they enter this compound, which is populated by not too many, but about half a dozen trained military professionals. I don't know where they were in their military career, but then ultimately in the last probably 30 to 40 minutes of the film, he pretty like cold and weaponless for the most part manages to like navigate this compound that he has only toured like 1.5 times. He manages to navigate the compound in such a way that he stays hidden from these trained military professionals, and basically I call this the suddenly Rambo moment. It's like, suddenly Rambo.
Oh my God.
So, but like all of a sudden, this courier with no military background is able to overpower so many of these trained professionals. And there is something to be said for, like, he gets the drop on them and it's surprising and everything. But I'm like, some of the things he does, I'm like, how did you do this? And so that's I mean, listeners could be like, Reed, come on, you're thinking too much about it. And maybe you're right, but it's such a strong pivot in the film that it bothered me in the first viewing to where it actively caused me to dislike a large chunk of the film. It still bothered me in this viewing, but not to the effect of downgrading my appreciation for what the film's trying to do. But that's my major nitpick with 28 Days Later, is this like, there's no way this courier would have been able to overcome these military professionals.
I am actively resisting going there yet because I love this movie and I want to spend some time with some other elements. But that is not me ignoring what you're saying, because it has value. Everything you say has value, Reed. You're a valuable fella. So
I appreciate that.
And yes, that was what I was paying attention to more directly this time, just knowing from however many years ago at this point when we compared notes that was your kind of stumbling block. And so I just
sure.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. But I'm jumping all over the film here, but knowing our mutual love of this actor, Reed, is there a more badass image on film than Brendan Gleeson at the top of stairs in riot gear, towering, ready to take on this little horde of infected? When that happened, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, it's so awesome. And you know what's funny is this is, I believe, only my second viewing of it. It might be my third, but I think it's only my second. I think pretty contemporary to the time I tried it again to see if I would enjoy it a little bit more. But the one moment, or like the presence that was most indelible in this film to me, was Brendan Gleeson's presence. Even before I was such a huge fan of his as I am now, like his character and his character's scene where he becomes infected and everything is just, It's really devastating and very powerful. And I'm right there with you. Like that image of him just standing up there, like
It's so
They
great.
better not come up these stairs. Like it's it's pretty wonderful.
Like this gargoyle, this sentinel protecting things. So yeah, I mean, he's so great. No one in the cast is bad, but my love for him just makes every moment he's on screen that much more enjoyable.
Absolutely.
This is in track with what I would say I love about the production and its intentionality and some of these subtle notes. Two things real specifically. One is the gentleman, his name is Mark. Jim is making his way through the streets, and Selena and Mark find him and kind of take him in. But Mark is telling the story of his siblings or of his family and the airport swarm, and it never cuts. The camera never cuts away from his face, and it would be understood if someone missed this. Like it's that dim from a audio standpoint, but there is very subtle audio of kind of horrific shrieks and screaming.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even catch that. Wow. Yeah, I didn't even catch it.
So as he's telling this story, and, thank you to Dr. Dre for my Beats headphones, things like this come out more. But yeah, as he's telling the story very low, you can hear audio of the story he's telling.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's really powerful.
Oh my gosh.
The other production note that's a visual one and not an audio one that I just love, and actually is adjacent to a scare, is when Cillian Murphy, when Jim is at his home and enters into a memory of his parents. It's so beautiful.
Yes,
it's
wonderful.
Amazing. Go ahead.
And you're absolutely right. It enters into a scare. I did not recall the moment, but when I was sitting there watching it, I was so captivated by it. I was like, wow, this is remarkable. And I found it such a sweet and sensitive scene that then when the infected burst in on that, it was the moment in the film that was the most alarming to me, because then the infected come in and because it was I remembered where most of the other thing, like I remembered the infected guy in the bunker at the end, or like in the compound at the end. I remembered the tunnel sequence kind of. I there were so many things along the way that I remembered. I did not recall that in the midst of that moment, suddenly the infected burst in, and I yelped. It got me.
You talk about Yelp. So I asked my wife, I was like, hey, it's Danny Boyle, it's Cillian Murphy. This isn't just some random movie, hey, do you want to watch this?
No.
You don't have to. Now in her defense, she was like, no, I'll look at Pinterest and sit on the couch with you while you do that. Like, okay, fine. So I've got my headphones on. She is sitting 6 inches from me on the couch.
Oh my gosh.
And Reed, I was utterly unprepared for the infected to jump into the mirroring scene, and I bicycle kicked the air. I was so alarmed. I mean, it was like Wile E. Coyote on his back, like just. I mean, it was, and she's
here come the infected.
Yeah. And I mean, like I'm. Oh man, it undid me. I mean, just such a.
I'm just visualizing you. Like a big human top just spinning around. Like, oh, Lord, save the Jesus. No.
Yes. It was effectively like
funny.
that. Before we get too far into scares, I've got 2 major likes that remain, but do you have any other likes that you want to address?
Just mentioning, not even like a major like, just mentioning in passing that old Reverend Matt from the Leftovers.
Oh,
Matt Jameson. I had forgotten entirely that he was in the film, so that was a nice. And I don't. When we were revisiting these, I don't like look up cast list or something like that. I just watch it. And so when he showed up, I was like, "Dang! I'd completely forgotten that he was in this. That was fantastic." So anyway, that's it.
Yes, that was one of my 2. The other one that again just drives home. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This movie's really growing in my heart and estimation.
Oh boy.
I don't know that it is a cemetery, but in my mind it was a cemetery. The scene, and what I wrote is the pastoral poetry of this scene. It's when the team is eating their take after they've been to the grocery store.
Yes.
And they're watching the horses
Yeah.
And
yeah,
Brendan
and they're just
Gleeson
running. Mhm.
blows the horses a kiss.
Yes, it's lovely. Yeah, it's
And,
really
and
lovely.
actually what I wrote, and this will have resonance in a little bit, is the beauty in hell.
Mm.
And man, I just loved that scene. Scares?
I don't have any more listed. I mean, honestly, like no, I'm not, and that's not because the film is not scary. It's frequently will cause jumps. It's very upsetting and disturbing in places. I just I didn't note any with specific intention to mention on the pod. So yeah, go where you want to go.
The hello in the church.
Yes. Oh,
is-
and then that image where they dart up to
Yes.
look at him and then like pause for a minute. Oh, it's pretty freaky. It's very, very unnerving.
Yeah, those dudes get up and just glare. I love the tunnel scene. That's great.
Yeah, it's
like-
pretty harrowing. It's wonderful. Yeah.
I did have the how realistic is it that you could drive a vehicle over whatever it is they're driving it over and get completely to the other side and only have a flat tire. But whatever.
Sure, I understand.
I'll go with it. So I mean, the last scare I have is just the bird and the body and the drop of blood. I mean,
That moment is so devastating.
It's
It's so
painful.
devastating. Yeah, it's really upsetting. And I, again, singing the praises of Brendan Gleeson. He knows what's about to happen, so chooses actively, while urging her to get away from him, for his last sane words to be to his daughter, "I love you very, very much." It's just a heartbreaking scene. It's very devastating.
Okay, so what do you want to talk about, theme, or do you want me to just open it up?
No, you go ahead. No, go for it.
So I've got
I'm here for the Nathan Rouse show. Is what it is.
Well, I sometimes am, but there's a lot here. But I want to gift you. Listeners can't see that I'm holding nothing in physical space, but I'm gifting you this Scholar's Stone read. It's been known to bring material wealth to people, and
so metaphorical of you.
Yes, you're a good man, Reed. It is all metaphorical. So, like, my gears are turning in real time as we've been having this conversation, and you may have seen this, listeners won't. I'm actually adjusting notes as we go, 'cause like, oh, okay, that one just got ironed out a little bit. So, my initial concession to you was going to be not that I agree that there's something mistaken about having Jim do what he does in the end, but that I thought, because and also for listeners who may have not seen this film yet and based on this conversation want to, or watched it in prep for this conversation and didn't know to do this, there is a very significant credits sequence
After credits, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if you don't see it, this conversation will have a little less meaning. So what I was initially going to concede is that I think they made the wrong choice there. Like, literally going into this conversation, my notes were Alex Garland and Danny Boyle, cowed to studio interference to make the lesser ending the ending. And I don't know that I think that anymore, based on something I just stumbled upon unrelated to the ending in my notes. Ideally, maybe you take out the actual physical credits that occur between the quote-unquote ending and the follow-up scene, and maybe that achieves a little bit. So I remember my experience of first watching this film, and I think my energy around what the film turns into, and I don't mean Jim, but the film, like, the compound, and Matt Jameson says it multiple times, people kill people. Like,
yes.
The axis of the film pivots on that. And it just always kind of impressed me, as, a early 20-something really starting to stretch my film and story comprehension muscles of, okay, this is something you can do. This is a way to cloak something interesting in something pretty rote and conventional, right?
Sure.
But that always stuck with me, that 28 Days Later is that movie that makes you think it's one thing and then it kind of turns into something a little different and deeper. And so that coupled with your nitpick about Jim is how I went into this film. Was, okay, let me just, knowing what I know about the film and having seen it, let me just do the 3,000-foot view here.
Right.
And what I would say is I think Alex Garland and Danny Boyle are too smart for Jim's kind of evolution to be just, for lack of a better word, fan service, right? Like, oh, okay, now he's going ham on these dudes at the end.
Right.
It feels that way to me. And so by no means do I think this film doesn't happen. The events of this film don't happen to the characters in the film, but I do think this film operates on a very meta level in a way that I didn't understand at first. Because to me, and I don't know the inroads here, so I'll just start kind of spewing this stuff out onto the table, and we'll kind of try to make a cohesive picture here. So maybe to even sort of help my own brain wrangle some of this, I'll articulate the actual on-screen events for both of us to kind of spring from. So yes, sure. Jim awakens in this hospital. He's on his own. Then he meets this pair of folks. One of them suffers and dies. He and the character Selena join up with Gleason and his daughter. They find their way because they hear this recording that is promising safety, and even, I don't remember the exact language, but it's like, we figured it out. We know how to help make this better.
The cure for the infection is here.
Okay, yeah. So they effectively get lured into a trap, but unbeknownst to them. And so where they end up is this massive military compound being run by Chris Eccleston, who we will, as we have done and henceforth, refer to as Matt Jameson. And Gleason gets taken out before this, so it's just Jim, Selena, and the teenage daughter Hannah. And you as viewers are savvy enough to know, or we as viewers rather are savvy enough to know, okay, this not all is what it seems, just based on the trappings of these military guys in this facility. And a moment happens where Jim and Jameson have a one-on-one scene together, and feel free to fill in some gaps if I'm forgetting something. But effectively, what happens in that scene is Jameson reveals to Jim, in a very harrowing bit of scripting, I promised them women.
Yep.
And you feel the narrative shift, right? You feel the ground move of like, oh my God, what have these characters walked into? And this is where, is this where Jim leaves the compound? Or is that
he tries to? No, he tries to. So what happens is he tries to get away. He grabs Selena and Hannah. They try to leave. They are surrounded by the soldiers, overpowered, and then Jim is taken out along with the lone soldier who tried to assist them leaving.
The dissenter,
Yeah, the dissenter and Jim are taken out. The dissenting soldier is killed, and in that process, Jim effectively runs away and escapes, leaving him to be able to then later come back and invade the compound and overpower them.
Yes. And so when, as Reed has alluded to, what happens is off-site, Jim, realizes what's going on, or has been made privy to what's going on, and is making his way back to the compound, and then becomes this kind of angel of death, kind of lurking and taking characters out, that culminates and climaxes in a rather brutal kill on the part of Jim. And because one of the lead lascivious soldiers is about to sexually assault Selena, who Jim has come to be affectionate and attracted to, and so he intervenes and kills him by gouging his eyes out. And it's this very brutal, really excellently shot scene, but very brutal. So I really wish there was a real poetic way into this, but there isn't. So I'm just going to start vomiting sort of thoughts to you. So it always stuck out to me, and really did this time around, that and when I say this, how kind of the scholar stone, this metaphorical idea. At the beginning of the film, the scientists who stumble on the primates who have been infected refer to they've been infected with rage. Okay, well,
Yes.
in a very real, verisimilitude sense, no scientist in the real world would dub a thing rage. It's clearly a metaphor. It's clearly an indicator. What did you infect these things with? We infected them with rage. Like, okay, that's and that's tiny, but it's to me the pebble that starts rolling down the hill of metaphor, right? And
I get it.
So that's starting point. Ending point is people kill people. Okay, that then is our spiritual spine to this film. People kill people. And so ultimately what you have is quote unquote zombie as backdrop for a story about our own violence and brutality to each other, which is not new to this genre. But I think 28 Days Later takes that idea and elevates it a little more. And this part just came to me today. So, and the very end, Jim kills this man, and on his way out, there's this big escape scene. Jim, Selena, and Hannah, they're on their way out of the compound. Jim gets shot, and Hannah, he gets shot in the gut, and Hannah is manning the wheel of this car, and they plow through this gate to leave, but Jim is wounded. Well, and then there's just this freeze frame, and then it cuts to a really amazing aerial view of what you think is the word hell, but you come to find out is spelled out hello for helicopters and airplanes and whatnot. And what you find is, Jim and Selena and Hannah have all made it, and they're, kind of recovering and recuperating on this countryside cabin thing. And it ends with them hearing and running and waving to, I can't remember if it's a helicopter or a plane or whatever, but point being, rescue is imminent. Well, then credits start rolling. We're all left with a little bit of a happy feeling that our heroes made it. Midway and or towards the end of the credits, film resumes, and it just says "What if" on the screen. And that "what if" is it resets to the escape in the car. They, instead of freeze frame, end up in a hospital where Selena is trying to save the life of Jim and fails. And Jim dies. And this sequence ends with Hannah and Selena, who have been robed in these beautiful red dresses because they are the women who have been promised to these soldiers. So it's very iconic imagery of them exiting this hospital. So those are the things you have. My initial take was, I wish they'd used that other thing, but something revealed otherwise. So front of the film, you have rage. Spine of the film is people kill people. The reason Jim's evolution doesn't bother me is Jim is our literal everyman. And this movie is positioning that, infected or not, rage is in us all. Mm-hmm. And I mean, even today, you made a joke about his occupation, and I'm actually, it's easy to miss when it happens. So this actually isn't me, kind of picking at you, but you made reference to accountant. And I was like, well, no, he's a courier. And dude, even that, I was like, oh my God, he is a carrier, Reed.
Yes.
He is one who carries. Infection is inside of us.
Yeah. Right.
It's in the blood, as it were, in the film. Mm-hmm. And so why the Rambo moment doesn't bother me is because I think a lot about the film Road to Perdition, and this comes up in this conversation here, because spoiler alert for Road to Perdition, if you've never seen it, 1, it's a fantastic film. 2, Tom Hanks dies. Well, watching the film Road to Perdition years ago, even watching it initially, I was like, he has to die. Like, this is the nature of a morality play, is the one who, however much we are on his side, commits heinous wrong, cannot, doesn't mean he literally has to die, but he is not granted the next path of this story.
Right.
So too with Jim in this, and I'm a little scattered, and I apologize for that, but it's trying to wrap all this up, but not for finishing, but for trying to develop a through line here. But to me, because Jim becomes this iconic man, literally and figuratively, he must then enact the spiritual spine of the film, which is people kill people. And what this movie is after is cycles of violence and brutality of us towards each other. And and to me, Jim releasing Maylor, who is the chained infected at the compound, is not what dooms him. It is the act of murdering this man. It is, and what clicked with me in a real profound way today is, to get biblical on us a little bit, the film starts with Jim as Adam. What is the very first image of Jim? It is stark.
He's completely naked.
Stark naked, completely in full view of the camera. It is not hidden. It is not obscured. It is a grown, naked man on a bed, incapacitated. Okay.
Right.
Well, that is iconic. That is meaningful. So you've got this Adam character, this every person character, and then you've got Cain murdering Abel over his birthright. Right? It is, you have taken that which I have now decided is mine.
Right.
And that to me is that scene is so brutal. And I think that's its point, right? That, it is shattering a stone over another man's head. And I didn't mean to make a Parasite reference there.
Yeah, I understand though.
Respect! And so the last two puzzle pieces I'm going to throw out here, and then I'm going to try to stop talking and see what your thoughts are here, and if I've at all ironed out any of the wrinkles you had here. But my initial problem with going with what are perceived as two different endings gets a little ironed out if you remove that middle section of credits sequence or just pretend it's not there. Because read what happens. So we cut to flash. I'm sorry, the frame freezes in the car. What is the next shot?
28 days later.
Well, that's what's text on screen. What is the physical image that happens? Do you remember?
Yeah, it has like a 2-second flash of them in the hospital and her like curing him.
Yes.
And then he wakes up in the bed. He's clothed this time. He's bandaged. He's got his shirt off, but he wakes up in a bed, much more pastoral. He opens his eyes,
yes,
close up on his face.
And it's already been referenced once in this conversation. You're forgetting one piece of footage, and that is an aerial shot. When 28 Days Later appears on screen, there's an aerial shot of the countryside and what's written on the ground.
Yes. Hell. Yep.
I think my interpretation is yes. Jim's choices have doomed him. We create a hell of our own design, and that what actually literally happens in the physical real is they don't save him.
Yeah.
And more than that, because I think so highly of, and I haven't even seen everything they've done, but as in just as far as Garland is concerned, go listen to our Annihilation conversation. I love Ex Machina. Like, I didn't even know he wrote this until I started it the other night. And I'm such a respecter of these two guys' brains and how they execute their stories. Right. That it's, these puzzle pieces fit somehow. And to me, my takeaway is the film is asking us the question, how do we break the cycle? And I am going to make a supposition that is rooted in our conversations, that is rooted in our even worldview a little bit. Like it or not, the film truly ends with the women robed in iconic imagery, right? They're not in street clothes. They're not plain clothes characters now. They are in the way that Jim is iconic man, this is now iconic woman. And I am going to posit for myself, my takeaway here is it's iconic other. It is the non-dominant form, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Eccleston, Matt Jameson promises women. He is using non-dominant other to pacify dominance, right?
Yeah.
And I think for our purposes, as I sort of engage and am inspired by this text, it's our submission, our deference to a non-dominant other, critics would be like, oh, equality, you say we're equal, whatever, and you're elevating the women. Yes, I kind of am, but I'm also saying whatever is not us is more than likely going to be the thing that saves us, right? And we participate in that, but and I'm kind of going all over the place and feeling a little out, and I'm feeling a little naked on a bed right now, and I need someone to put something on me, even if it's a red dress. I'm okay with that.
I'll throw a hospital sheet over you.
Yes.
So
does this make any sense? I mean, like,
it absolutely does. No, you're not in the weeds, and I will say that as I've frequently referenced on the show, like I am very, very comfortable with metaphor and viewing even my nitpick of the final 30 minutes of the film as this metaphorical observation of how people kill people and this progression within Jim as a character and what it means to the larger scope of what the film's trying to say. I can completely get on board with that, to the degree that I no longer fuss about a way they could have done it differently. Like, I accept it. This is what they're after. This is what they're trying to express. So I get that. One of the things that stood out to me that you didn't mention that was from that scene where Eccleston is talking to him is, do you remember what he said about why he promised them women?
No.
He says because women are a future. Like they could, and the reason he did it is because he was losing control of the group, and he found one of them about to end his life. And here's what I feel from what you're saying. I feel like I'm tracking mostly with what you're talking about these people kill people. We talk at length on the show, or have before, about the what we've sometimes dubbed the commoditization of people, and the way that people are means to an end, that they are a product. And so what stands out to me, mirroring some of my own thoughts with what you have expressed, is he promised them women because women equal future. And what he has then basically positioned is, we need these people to produce our future, and so we are going to build our future on the backs of these people. We are going to subjugate, yes, perfect word. We're going to conscript them into our means, because that is our future. It does not matter what they have to say about it. Their agency, their autonomy, their desires, none of that matters. I promised them women because women equal future. That's what Eccleston says, and that is the sort of impulse behind why he is so monstrously willing to basically coerce them into, like, yes, so you're in our nexus now, which is a horrific thought to think about. Not only the adult woman, which is horrific in its own end, but this, this younger teen girl is also going to be coerced into these purposes. That is the setup of the film. Thankfully, the film never goes to a place that is visually, too far down that path. For listeners who may be sensitive to that kind of material, the subject and the theme are definitely there. The film never exploits that. But that is what latched onto me. It's not just that they are the other, the underrepresented. It's not just that. It's that in the eyes of this leader and these soldiers, they are now product, commodity. They are an ingredient to their future, and they are nothing more than that. They are not human beings. They are not able to substantiate things on their own volition. I can get to Jim in a second, but you've got something burning there. What you thinking?
To even add and kind of solidify even further, like, whether this was intentional or not, I don't know, but I do think it matters, especially to American history. But adult black women are, of which Selena is not Caucasian, are preyed upon sexually
Yes.
So you've got not just woman, but, a brown-bodied woman. So you've got someone who societally is already preyed upon in greater sort of volume, as it were, in a brown-bodied woman, adult woman, and you've got a most vulnerable teen. Like those are
Yes, right.
which, good Lord, just adds to the weight of the agency and empowerment of those being the ones who walk away into new reality at the end, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's really
Yes.
powerful imagery.
But and we take it that way. Did you read in your trivial research why they changed it?
Which blows my mind that
I know,
there was
yeah.
concern that you can clarify this, but my memory is simply that there was audience concern that what was being positioned by the film was them unable to make it in whatever's next for themselves. Which is wild and reveals a whole lot of interesting bias.
Yes, the audience presumed with that ending that Hannah and Selena were wandering out to their death, and that they would not be able to survive past that moment. And because of that, they changed the ending to the sort of the pre-credits ending, so that it would be more firmed up that Selena and Hannah survived the events of the film. But getting to Jim and getting to this sort of this transformation that he has, I'm sure I read it. I picked up on it a bit visually, but I'm not savvy or smart enough to know that it was like this intention. There was a very specific, I'm going to be really deficient in being able to describe it, but there was a very specific camera aesthetic whenever the infected rage people were on screen. The camera would have this sort of jerking quality to it. The entire final 30 minutes of the film, whenever Jim is acting against the soldiers, the camera takes intentionally the same exact effect, even though Jim himself is not infected. So another reason, even beyond your case for it, which was well made, that I'm so on board with your metaphor idea, is that they're making a direct visual connection to the rage infected and what Jim is doing at the end. Though he is not infected by the virus, he is still succumbing to the rage that lives within him, and it's an interesting moment that I'm not making this all about this, but my wife and I are going to be a little jokey about this part of it, but as of right now, who knows how 3 weeks from now this is all going to be viewed or said or whatever, but at this moment that we're recording, coronavirus is hotly debated in terms of its threat level and in terms of its impact on people. But what is not debated is that nobody in the world can buy hand sanitizer, and inexplicably, toilet paper is also very hard to come by. We, lots of the shelves are just empty, like it's just looted, and people are out of water and toilet paper and hand sanitizer. And my wife and I were commenting in different ways about like what in the world translates about what's happening with this virus to, okay, it's a bronchial sort of respiratory attack, buy all the toilet paper. Like where is that disconnect happening? But what it really stems from is, and this gets to something interesting that I'm not actively trying to sort of be clever here, but what we observed in the top 10 list of 2002 is all these sorts of ideas of confinement. And here's what's interesting to me about 28 Days Later. I'm going to try to wrangle this down cohesively so that maybe we can eye towards an ending here. That what's happening right now in the reel with the coronavirus, at least one element of it is, I think, this is just my supposition, people are stocking up on things because they are worried they may be contained, either self-imposed or mandated, that they'll be contained for a long period of time and they won't have essential supplies. So they're just going to, collect and hoard and collect things for themselves so that they'll be stocked up on what they need should the event arise that they can't leave for a couple of weeks or whatever. And it's interesting to me how in 2002's list, how many of the films navigated a narrative point, sometimes as the substance of the film, of confinement. You're trapped, you're stuck. And in 28 Days Later, it is posited by the dissenting soldier that we keep referencing. I apologize that I've forgotten his character's name. The dissenting soldier says, this is not a global, the disease in 28 days later is not a global phenomenon. He said it's not. We've been quarantined, he says. England, Britain, has been cut off. They've cut us off entirely. This has not happened all over the world. This is only happening to Britain. We've been infected. We've been diseased. And so we've been trapped. And that's his theory. And if you'll recall, when Jim first escapes from the soldiers who were trying to kill him, and he runs into the woods, he stumbles, and when he rolls over, what does he see? Up in the clouds. Do you remember this moment? He's laying in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks up and he sees there's a plane flying across it. And he's like, and when he sees that the plane is flying across it, it connects to him. Oh, that soldier was correct. This is only happening to Britain. This is only happening to us. And that there is a world out there. There is a future out there. So I'm trying to marry a couple of different ideas here. So that is when he becomes emboldened to break in and seize back control of the situation, rescue Selena and Hannah, get them out, is because he sees, I'm going to be very deliberate with my language here, he sees a future. He saw a future in the sky and knows, like, they're out there. That is why he was so confident at the end that they could lay out the letters to the word hello and that there would be people flying over eventually who would see them, is because they knew outside here, outside Britain, they're not infected, or everything is sort of fine. I don't know about fine, but like
sure.
they're in control of it. The world is still moving on. And so what that is pinging to me with what you're saying and what is happening in the world around us with this virus and what 28 days later sort of pinged and rose up in me is this idea of, and you and I talked about this in completely different contexts, just in one of our casual We're Friends conversation about how despair occurs. This is not something that I made up. It's something I heard somewhere. The psychological reality is despair occurs when you do not see a future. When you do not see hope beyond now, that is when despair comes in. And you can have a couple of different reactions to it. One of the reactions that I think 28 days later lays out is you can then begin to see your needs as utmost important to the situation. So I'm going to hoard supplies. I'm going to stock supplies. It's every man for himself. I'm just going to bring all this in to the degree that these soldiers are now, we are going to use these women that have wandered into our camp as our future. This is going to now be our future. So you begin to devalue people. You begin to devalue the hope that is kind of set before you, your own capacity to get past this situation and to move on. You'll devalue all of that for the sake of, I don't see a future, so I am going to use everything at my disposal to ensure that my future is secured, is stabilized, and so that just fascinates me in terms of this idea of, and I'm going to say this as basically as without trying to sound too bumper stickery, is I feel like we talk a lot about like faithful living and a faithful life and a faithful perspective. I think that has to always contain at least some element of your present circumstances do not define your future. Like your present circumstances do not define whether or not there is a future ahead of you. A lot of times we only look at just right now, the situation directly ahead of us, and if we do not see anything beyond today, then we enter into despair. And it is just amazing to me. And what's the name of the film? The name of the film is very simply 28 Days Later. In the film, future is baked into the title. Like the concept of what happens in the distant future or in the near distant future is baked into the title of the film. So and I'm kind of...
Can I throw something at you there?
Sure.
Well, I'm sorry. If you had a...
No.
If you're going somewhere specific. Because what's funny about that is I thought about this today. I actually think for this film, the title could also be an application of it's just a cycle. It's the same thing. It's going to be we are... that
it's going to be... I understand that. But I think, and the ellipsis dots are important as well. That it's not just 28 days later as a closed statement. To your point about the cycle, there are ellipsis dots after the later. I feel like I'm going to edge into real bumper stickery language, which I don't like doing, but feeling the weight of time and impulse to kind of wrap this up. The notion that I guess what future do you want to see? What future do you want to be? You, Nathan Rouse, I think had told to you by someone in a certain context, and you repeated it to me, and it echoes in my spirit. I think we've even brought it up on the show before, but if you were to look at yourself 5 weeks from now, 5 months from now, 5 years from now, 28 days later from now, will you be proud of how you're navigating your present circumstances? Will you be proud of who you are, of what you're doing? Will you be pleased with what you are aiming for in the future? And what I find interesting about the moment we're in, the cultural moment we're in, is how prone people are to only think about themselves. So we are making this campaign sort of artwork, and we're making these jokes at the top of the screen about like, yeah, campaign and we won, and all that kind of thing. Those are that's kind of the motif we've adopted for this year. It's an election year. Friend of the show, who former guest J.R. Forasteros, wrote something on Election Day that really impacted me, and I'm going to make this kind of my final statement on 28 Days Later and all of these thoughts that we're kind of trying to wrangle down. He talked about, as he went out to vote, he talked about the golden rule voting. The golden rule, as we've, as listeners probably know, is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's biblical. It's this idea of that is a way to navigate your life. Do to other people what you want them to do unto you. And what J.R. Forasteros had written down, he had unpacked basically like vote unto others, because most people tend to vote self-minded. Like, I'm going to vote for the things that I want to see happen. I'm going to vote for the policies and the people that are going to further my agenda. But how would that change if you voted others-minded? What is going to benefit the larger community? What's going to benefit the larger group of people? What's going to benefit the downtrodden? What's going to benefit the people who are suffering and struggling right now? And basically, like, vote unto others as you would want them to vote unto you. And this whole idea of golden rule voting or golden rule thinking when it comes to a crisis is something that is counterproductive to us, because what happens is the cycle we're in is a pattern of self-destruction where the crisis hits, we get super selfish, and then it becomes our undoing, which is what happened. I mean, they left that infected guy in there, and then he cut loose and wreaked havoc on them, at Jim's doing, but that's what happened to them. And if you take the final after-credits scene, that's what happened to Jim as well. He basically, it was his own undoing, his giving in to his rage. But we have active choices to be able to create a different pattern of behavior, to at least be able to influence a different way of thinking, a different cycle, to implement something else, a cycle. Because what's the other prominent thing that we think about when we think about cycles? You think about seasons. Or I do. You think about the seasons of, eventually there is an autumn, if you will, sort of a dying away, and a winter is a kind of a coldness. But then what happens? I live in California, so it doesn't happen very often, but it springs forth into new life. And you decide, this is my final statement on 28 Days Later, you decide what cycle you're going to be a part of. Are you going to be a product of the destructive cycle, of the hell cycle, if you will, or will you gosh, apologies for the bumper sticker, okay, everybody? Or will you add that other circle of the O at the end instead of hell and turn it into hello? What cycle are you going to be a part of? The hellish cycle or the hello cycle, where you are greeting the new, where you are ushering in the new, where you are transacting the new? Or are you going to be participating in the decay and the destruction? And as Christ has said to us, all who seek to save their life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it. Like, you choose what pattern you're going to follow, what cycle you are going to participate in. And I think I'm done in terms of my thoughts there.
Well, it's funny because this, what you were positioning there called to mind the specificity you brought up, and we are beating this drum of our kind of electoral motif. And I'm going to get specific for a moment, not to critique, but to comment. On Super Tuesday a few weeks ago, Joe Biden had this real, to a lot of folks, surprising sort of showing, right? And it's interesting because I stumbled that day, or maybe the subsequent day, and the day or two after that, on this Twitter personality, and I'll reference her here. Her name is Lisa Sharon Harper. And one of the things she said that really arrested me, and she is African American herself, and Joe Biden has had the African American population to largely thank in the South and South Carolina specifically for his kind of resurgence, as it were. And It's interesting, and where I'm going with this is to intersect directly with what you're talking about, because this woman, Lisa Harper, in reflecting as a Black woman on what this meant, she says the Biden wave is about a revelation of the level of trauma our nation has absorbed. And more than that, she goes on in a subsequent tweet in this thread to say, in the middle of terror, dreaming becomes nearly impossible. When terrorized, you literally have one goal: make it stop.
Wow.
And it's so powerful to me, this notion of the cycles of violence and brutality that power perpetuates, leaving powerless in the debris, right? Discarded and broken and traumatized in this cycle of gain and pursuit and accumulation and enriching. And I think there's a lot of convenience attached to me, a middle-class white man, being able to say this stuff. So I don't say it, or what I'm about to say, I don't say this with pithiness or with ease, or think that it is an easy thing. But we talked a lot in our On Writing episode about the notion of a holy imagination. And I think what, as Lisa Harper shares here, in the middle of terror, dreaming becomes nearly impossible. You literally have one goal: to make it stop. And I think, Reed, what is harrowing and an awful thought is the notion of dreaming becoming impossible, right? But when you're in the middle of these cycles of violence and trauma, all you want is for it to stop. And I think, for myself, and I think you would say for you too, like, this is what the Christ mystery embodies, is the capacity to dream, is the willingness to imagine and sometimes force into reality an alternate perspective and or notion and or world that is outside of this cycle, right?
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I just, this is a lot that I really didn't expect to come out of this, but I don't know. This film really kind of captured my imagination this time around.
Yeah. And it's easy to understand why. There, as you put it near the top of our conversation, the film has a lot on its mind. Mm-hmm. And I think, we're dancing around a lot of different things, these ideas of cycles, these, in what you were just saying, I recalled the oft quoted biblical passage of, where the Lord compelled his people, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, for a hope and for a future. I feel like the capacity to dream, as you articulated it, and to see a world beyond this present state of things, metaphorically and physically, is a huge part of the journey of faith, is to be able to envision. I mean, what does the book of Hebrews tell us too? Like faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Like, I can look around at my circumstances right now and it looks pretty bleak, it looks pretty dim, it looks pretty harrowing, but there is a world, a hope, a love beyond these present boundaries, beyond this present confinement. I mean, Personally speaking, I feel like we could, go on for another 2 hours on this. I'm going to recommend that we leave it there unless there was something you really feel like was left unsaid in the conversation, because I feel like these are all worthwhile observations. But I want to defer. Like, was there anything that you didn't get to unpack that you want another moment to do so, or do you want to pivot into the fog meter?
I'm cool with fog meter. I think I want to figure out how to wrap my words around more of what I feel has inspired by this film, but for our purposes currently, yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, as we do on every film, we go to our very specific metric of fear and God, measuring its scares and its substance. So for 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle from 2002, your favorite, listeners, horror film of 2002, on the fear measurement, I'm going to go first, and I'm going to give it, it's pretty harrowing in a couple of places, and boy, it'll make you bicycle kick and twirl around in your room. I'm gonna give it a pretty firm 8 on the fear metric.
Yes, that was the number that was materializing in my brain before you said it, and so I will bicycle kick right along with you, an 8 for the fear.
What about for the God meter?
I think a lot of movies sometimes will utilize metaphorical imagery and whatnot as token notion and signaling of metaphor, right? Like, oh, look, this means something.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think this movie does that. I think it takes work to find what's there. I think it's an incredibly smart film, an incredibly well realized idea, only because I think an unfortunate occurrence is a little bit of a confused experience of the end. I'm going to give it a 9 for substance.
I feel like there is a lot on this movie's mind. You've brought me a fair piece of wholeheartedly embracing that previous nitpick about the ending, and there is a lot on its mind. I'm going to give it a 7.
Nice.
And that means that we give 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle, a firm, unqualified 8 out of 10 on the fog meter. Very firm showing for good old 28 Days Later. How do you feel about that? You feel a little let down? You feel good?
It'd be nice if it was a hair higher, but I think that's fair.
Fair. I gotcha.
Yeah,
I gotcha. Yeah. Well, I think that probably answers my next question, which is, would you recommend 28 Days Later?
Yes, I would actually. Knowing how much I enjoyed this viewing, I could go watch it right now. I thoroughly enjoyed this film.
Yep. My affection is a bit tempered by previous experiences, but I too would recommend the film. It's interesting, stylistically very ambitious, and as we've said, has a lot on its mind. I would also recommend 28 Days Later. That puts this installment of 2020 in the books. Next week,
what are we doing next?
Oh my gosh! So next week.
You thought 28 Days Later had a lot on its mind. Like,
oh man, you want to talk about got a lot on its
shoot? It's got a lot of something on its something.
It's got that is a perfect way to put that. It's got a lot of something on its something. We're going to 2003 next, ladies and gentlemen, and so we are going to be diving into a Fear of God debut of one Mr. Rob Zombie, and we are going to be going to his debut directorial film, House of 1,000 Corpses. I am going to say, which we don't always do, I am going to give a very strong disclaimer to consider discernedly if you want to just listen to us or if you want to watch the film to prep for us, because this one is extreme in a lot of different ways. And if you choose to rent it and watch it, if you have not already seen it, then be cautious that it'll be on your feed. The cover art will be there for like a long time after that. So So, more on that next week. But, so our film next week is going to be Rob Zombie's debut film, House of a Thousand Corpses. In all sincerity, look up a little bit about it and see if you want to watch it. But regardless, we hope that you will join us next week for that. Nathan, thank you so much for
having
Riri. This conversation with 28 Days Later and for all you brought to it. And listeners, as we say on every episode.
Sorry if it was a bit unwieldy, but that's...
No, I loved it. I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I'm grateful for it.
You're a good man.
You're a good man. And listeners, we really adore you. So as we say on every episode, fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing. We'll see you next week. Bye, Nathan.
See you guys. Bye, Reed.
The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And you can continue the conversation in a variety of ways. You can start by visiting thefearofgodpodcast.com for all the latest news and episodes, or for merchandise and to contact us directly. You can follow us on Twitter at The Fear of God, on Instagram at Fear of God Podcast, or join the Facebook Fear of God discussion group. Special thanks to Jacob Hunt of jacobhuntcomics.com for our artwork, to Lee Wright, who helped me, Reed Lackey, write our theme music, and to Tyler Smith at morethanonelesson.com for making our show possible. Lastly, be sure to subscribe to us on your podcast platform of choice, and if you listen to us through iTunes, we would greatly appreciate a rating and a review. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week.